Welcome to this quick guide to organising remote hearings. Since the lockdown a week ago, the courts, council and solicitors have been working hard to have their cases heard remotely where possible. Since we're still in the early days of remote hearings, this is a short guide and is intended to help those who may be trying to organise their first remote hearing. Our firm has now handled a number of remote hearings to include an appeal and several final hearings. There is a significant amount of guidance which is being updated regularly, so please ensure that you read that guidance as things are changing almost daily. Our Senior Associate James Netto has acted for an applicant in 2 child abduction matters in the last 7 days. Both were listed for final hearings, and he will share his experience and thoughts on the process with you. So James is an international children law specialist. So James, first question, please describe the types of hearings that you were dealing with in the last 7 days remotely, the length of those hearings, the location, number of parties, the court, and also the number of individuals that you were organising for this remote hearing.
Thank you, Lisette. So in the Children's Department at Dawson, Cornwell, we've had a number of urgent matters that have had to be heard within the last week or so. And as far as the High Court is concerned, it's business as usual, albeit it's all done remotely using various pieces of software. So last week I had 2 final hearings, and a colleague of mine had an appeal to the Court of Appeal, and they all went off more or less without a hitch. It went off pretty seamlessly. It does take some planning, it does take some engineering, but ultimately it's worth it. And indeed, I've got to say that the videos that we used were far better than many of the video link we had pre-corona. In the court system. So it's actually pretty reliable. I think practitioners can be fairly confident that if a hearing is going to be done remotely, it will proceed as expected, albeit you've got a view of everyone's front room or living room or whatever. So we've had a number of hearings. I've seen a lot of judges in their studies and in their living rooms, but it works. So in one matter last week, I had quite a big hearing. It was a final hearing in a child abduction case, so it had to go on. And we had leading and junior counsel from 2 parties, so that's four individuals, myself and my opponent's solicitor, that's 6, the mother and father, both attending in person, a CAFCAS officer and a judge. All were using Zoom for this hearing. It functioned phenomenally well. There was maybe a second or 2 throughout the whole day that the video link wasn't functioning perfectly, but otherwise, apart from that, we all had a hearing that was what we say functional. We did have to have a few dry runs. So we had a deputy High Court judge for this matter, and he was corresponding with the advocates directly using his personal email address. And maybe that's a little bit easier than going through a judge's clerk in the High Court. But this judge, he directed that we were to have a trial run first. Initially, we used Microsoft Teams, which I know a lot of people are using Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business. They're pretty interchangeable, I think. And it was a bit glitchy. There were points where not everyone was on the same page. Some people dropped off the call. So we tried that. It was our second best, but then we went on to use Zoom, and it was a lot better. One of the complicating factors in that case as well was that the father was a litigant in person. He didn't have any lawyers, which complicated matters even more. And he was able to access Zoom very, very easily.
And was that a final hearing, or was that an adjourned hearing with the final hearing going ahead later on?
So we had, there's been 2 separate hearings. And another case of mine was only advocates and a judge, and that went off as normal. But in relation to the other one with leading and junior counsel, it was listed for a final hearing, but adjourned for reasons not to do with the video link.
Right.
For other reasons, but we treated it as a 1-day directions hearing pretty much. We were in court virtually the whole day.
I think people may be interested to know how you just managed to communicate with your barristers and your clients during the hearing, perhaps before and after.
Yeah, I think that will turn on each individual barrister and each individual client. I mean, it's particularly where you've got an international case where your client might be abroad, you might be quite used to corresponding via email or WhatsApp. What we had in the background was, and we alerted the judge to this, was that we had WhatsApp messages passing beforehand, and I would thereafter drop an email to my counsel saying, mother says this, or another point that is raised. So it is possible, and there is always going to be an element where you see the other advocates glancing at their phones. But I suppose that's pretty similar to glancing behind you in court. There's no real difference, is there?
No.
And I should say as well, the judges were very facilitative. They welcomed that sort of correspondence, and they wanted to make sure that the parties felt like they were being heard. The hearings aren't as formal, I would say, as they are in person.
And can we talk a little bit about the practicalities of arranging that Zoom hearing? So who contacted the parties, who set it up, who was the host, who recorded it? Tell me about that.
We acted for the applicant in all of those matters. So the onus is on us as the applicant solicitors. I understand from the guidance, if you've got a local authority case, the local authority organises it. If you're for the applicant and the applicant is represented, then you are charged with dealing with this. And beforehand, we submitted a draft order to the court by paper. And it says, it had a number of recitals. So I've got it here. And one of the recitals is, upon the court determining that in the exceptional circumstances of the current national public health emergency, this case is suitable for hearing remotely by means of Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, whatever one you want to use, which provides video link and audio link services via email. And that was made as a paper exercise by a judge, and then it made a number of directions in relation to how the hearing was going to take place, who was going to dial in. So we submitted that in advance, the judge approved that on paper, and thereafter the judge hearing at the final hearing had this order in front of him. And it is permitted pursuant to FPR rule 4.1e. So that gives you the legal standing to have a hearing done remotely.
Super. And then the logistics that morning, you mentioned you had a couple of trial runs. So everybody managed to meet at a certain time. Was it 10 o'clock?
So we had a trial run the day before, and on the morning we arranged for the parties and the advocates to start at 10:15 with the judge entering the court at 10:30, and that went off very well. As you would in a hearing in real life, I suppose, in person. What as well I would recommend is having a little crib sheet somewhere, generally if you're for the applicants, where you've got everyone's phone numbers, or so that you can bring them up at short notice, and a judge will not mind, for example, if you leave the room, just to call your CAFCAS officer very quickly so that they can join the call. Of course, I know that certain barristers would not want their details, understandably, shared with lay parties, so it's generally incumbent on the solicitor to coordinate all of that.
That makes sense. Do you have any top tips, any things that you would do differently? We are in a moment of change, I suppose, so each day we're getting new guidance, but it sounds like it worked pretty well. Did you give live evidence? I suppose that's the other thing people might want to know.
We did. We had live evidence. One other thing you have to watch out for, somebody has to affirm your witness, unless they have a holy book at home, which I think is quite unlikely. You've got to cast your mind to that, as well as the practicalities. You want to have a court timetable. You want to have a witness template if that's possible. Set that all out and do as much paperwork as you can in advance, because then the judge will be less inclined to adjourn it, and will be more inclined to have the matter proceed, because these hearings do need to take place. The justice system can't just grind to a halt because of this. It has to be business as usual if it's safe to do so. So live evidence is possible. My top tips would be patience, do trial runs. It will be easier for some solicitors than others, and for some barristers than others, but it's not impossible. I've got to say, I think it works really well. Much better than some of the video links I've actually used in hearings otherwise, as I say. What I would say as well is that you probably want to find the software that works for you based on your technical capabilities. I'm not married to Zoom. I've got no allegiance to Zoom, but I found it the most user-friendly. I know there's Life-Size available. And I know that there's Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams. Each firm will find its own outfit. I know as well council's chambers are all gearing up, and if you're for the applicant, what you could do is work closely with your council's clerks, who should be hopefully proactive in helping you set up this hearing.
And then recording it as well. So the host records it. So that's not the judge on this occasion, it's the applicant, presumably.
It has to be the applicant, yes. So if you're using Zoom, for example, you can record it. There's a button on the bottom that says record. It's very easy, and it notifies all the parties when recording starts and when it ends, which is very useful. The same must be possible for the other software. If not, what you could do is download another program to run in the background of your hearing.
Yeah.
That's a bit fiddly. Plus, you just want to make sure that your judge is happy with the way in which the hearing is being recorded.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible.
And with that recording, do you then email that to the judge afterwards, or to all the parties, or what then happens with that recording?
So in the last hearing, the judge wanted us to confirm we had the recording, but didn't make a direction for it to be disseminated in any way.
Right.
I think there may be a concern for certain lay parties and what the material, where this material would end up, I can imagine. So, but just raise it with the judge, and the judge will make a direction about it.
Fine. Okay. James, thank you very much for sharing with us your experience, and we will certainly be updating this as time goes by and as we have more and more experience running these cases. But I hope it's useful, and thank you on behalf of all at Dawson, Cornwall.
Great. Thank you very much. Cheers.
All right. Bye for now.